Salutations to all of you Untitled 1 and Mekkah fans.
Hi.
We are yours truly, and this is Chapter 24X of my Fire Emblem 5 Paragon Mode 0% Girls playthrough. So after all the trouble that we went through in the previous chapter, babysitting the NPC boys, and having them wander around aimlessly to try to unlock this door that leads to a chest containing a staff that we don't really know what it does right now. All we know is that only Sarah can use it for some reason. We're also rewarded with this chapter.
And what a great reward it is. We finally get the chance to unstone Avel from her stone state that she was in since chapter 5. And to do that, we have to use the Kia staff on her, which is why you need to get this staff to unlock the chapter to begin with. And I would say Avel is a pretty poor reward for the trouble that this chapter puts you through. It's a pretty big trap for blind and new players. Because for one, it's fog of war, so you can't really see anything but the few spaces surrounding NPCs and allied units. And to make it worse, there's dark mages everywhere with the usual status staves. They come warping in and rewarping in everywhere. There's warp tiles that if you wait on them, you get warped into a prison room and you get attacked from all sides by enemies warping in. And it's an escape map, and that's really bad.
Right, because at this point in the game, we've already passed Chapter 21X, so we can't really cheese this map like the previous escape maps where we leave behind like half of our army. We can't do that anymore because there's no more opportunity to rescue any of our abandoned units. So we have to do this the right way. We have to make sure that everyone escapes, and in order to do that, we have to get everybody near the center room that contains, as we now see, a huge legion of dark mages and a dark bishop occupying the escape tile. Now you might notice that the floor tiles in the center room are all a weird purple color. That's because these are a special terrain called Magic Floor that we see starting in this chapter. The Magic Floor does as it implies. It gives all units plus 10 magic, including the enemies and also our allies. So that's what allows Linowin to silence these dark mages. And also when she levels up, the Magic Floor bonus is factored into the stats on the level up screen. So that's why it says she has 23 magic. We want to disable the two Dark Mages that are flanking the Dark Bishop boss because they have status staffs, and the Dark Bishop boss himself also has a Berserk staff, so we have to dispatch him anyway. We're just going to let Sed do that real quick.
Yeah, this is what we were talking about when we were discussing Sed and Sias and their differences. In a Gross playthrough, you could get away with recruiting Sias to save one turn, and he wouldn't have Sed, but it would be alright because you could substitute him in this case for Sarah, who would have the sufficient stats to stand in the middle of this room and force all these enemies to attack either her or Linowin, who is standing behind her, and once again using Nosferatu in combination with Wrath to ensure her own survival. But you can imagine if you were using a less capable combat unit, they would have very high chances of death. So that's not really what you want to do. And the main difficulty of this chapter is really getting everyone safely towards the center of the room, because you want them in range of the escape tile, preferably within one turn, so they can all escape at once. But you don't want them to be in range of all these dark mages and end up dying. Like, you can imagine someone like Lara wouldn't last a second inside of this room.
Right, and even our slightly less capable combat units, like, I don't know, Salem, right, if he gets hit twice, he's pretty much dead. Especially since a lot of these dark mages have the Jormungandr Hell combo, so that's pretty much instant death for anyone unless they restore all their HP ahead of time, like Linowin's doing. So essentially, we can only give the enemies two options to attack. Either they can try to attack Sed and really not hit him and get killed on the counter, or they can attack Linowin, and when Linowin kills them on a counter, she restores all of her HP. That's really the only two options that we have, combat-wise in this chapter, which is why we have to line up everyone else kind of outside of the room, instead of inside the room. Now, one thing that is really annoying is that some of these dark mages that come in and rewarp themselves into the center room, on the next enemy phase, theoretically, they could rewarp themselves on top of the escape tile, and because their turn ends immediately, they don't suicide, and then on turn 3, like, we can't all escape at once because somebody would have to kill that dark mage. So it is important to have somebody also occupy the escape tile. But on turn 1, we don't have to worry about that because dark mages always rewarp into the same positions.
Getting Avel back is pretty complex in and of itself. Usually you would get Sarah and Leaf or Marita, either of those can talk to her, over in that room, because not only do you need to use the Kia staff to restore her status, but you also need to talk to her with either Leaf or Marita in order to turn her blue. But we cannot use a rescue staff or a warp staff on her while she is green. So what we actually end up doing is we get Dermot over in Avel's room, have him pick up Avel, because she can use the rescue command on NPCs. And then we rescue Dermot when he's holding Avel, and that makes it a lot easier to get Avel back in good shape, so that we can escape the chapter with her.
Now I want to talk for a moment about the warp tiles that Mekkah had mentioned at the beginning of this chapter's commentary. The tile that Dermot is currently standing on is one very prominent warp tile. Obviously they look different from, they don't look any different from any other tile because they're intended to be kind of really underhanded traps that will get you killed. So there's no way to know ahead of time unless you look at a guide, but we're like doing things around this warp tile and we're not really being punished for it. The reason for that is you only get warped to the prison room if you end your turn on the warp tile with the wait command. If you do anything else, like if you drop someone else there, or if you're doing what Salem is doing right now, he's rewarping himself onto that warp tile, then the game thinks, oh, you never used the wait command, so we're not going to teleport you over to the prison room. You can, in a casual playthrough, if you're not going to be like warping and transporting units around like I am doing, one way to get around this, especially if you don't want to really play blind, or especially if you really want to play blind, is just like rescue somebody and drop somebody every turn if you can, or use items, or use staves, or basically do anything but wait.
Yeah, I suspect this is why Thracia puts the wait command at the top, just to make you fall for this kind of stuff. It's the only explanation I can think of that makes sense. So we want to occupy the escape tile on this very last turn to make sure that enemies do not, since we, if someone attacks that enemy on the escape tile last turn, then they cannot escape. And we use Avel for this because it's the most convenient, and also because she's actually pretty reliable at it. The tile itself gives plus 20 avoid, which is not immediately obvious, but it's very nice. It couples well with Avel's maxed out speed, and we also gave her the windsword for an extra bunch of speed. And since there are two enemies next to her that cannot attack her, they also prevent, say, the hero from attacking her. So these enemies are actually so impressed with Avel's evasion skills that they would rather attack Set instead, which is very strange. And now we have everyone lined up to escape on the last turn. Even Sloof, who is holding Safi, and this is only possible because he used the Nightproof to promote, and effectively in this chapter that gave him one extra movement, so Night Crest well spent.
Yes, the only kind of Night Crest that you'd spend in a 0% Girls playthrough. So the last thing I want to point out is one really annoying thing about this chapter is because there's so many staff uses, especially used by characters who don't have at least 10 skill. For example, Tina has an 80% chance of hitting, so 20% chance of missing. Linowin also has a 4% chance of missing. Salem can miss. Sloof, when he's rescuing Safi, can miss himself on the rewarp, which is kind of hilarious, but not really when you realize that you screwed yourself over. And on top of all that, Linowin has to hit everything. Her hit rate against the Dark Mages is pretty good, but it's not 99%. And her hit rate against the Sniper was only about 60%, so we got kind of lucky that she dodged the fatal blow, but the plan originally was that she one-hit KO'd the guy on a counterattack. And that would have been pretty easily possible because the magic floor gives her essentially plus 20 attack on a critical. So on the last turn before everyone bails, one last thing I just want to talk about was in the casual playthrough, you're probably going to encounter some enemy berserkers that populate this map. They're pretty tough, they have high stats, and they all have wrath, so you gotta be careful about them. But we didn't see any of them here. So that's chapter 24 acts completed in 3 turns. We'll see you next time.
See ya.